I would also like to extend a very special welcome to everyone who is joining us for the next hour live on the RTE News channel. We are delighted to have you here for this important discussion here today. And just a reminder for everyone here and at home, you can join our discussion by using the hashtag SocDems24. My name is Councillor Elisa O'Donovan. I am a local councillor in Limerick City West, where I also work part-time as a speech and language therapist. It is extra special for me today to be back here in UCD, where I studied almost 20 years ago, and to be here and surrounded by the most inspirational TDs, councillors, candidates, and party members that I think we have in Ireland. This year is a very important year for our local communities. In June, we have the local elections, we have the European elections, and in my own county of Limerick, for the first time in Ireland, we will have an election of a directly elected mayor. So it's an extremely exciting time in Ireland at the moment for local government. We are very fortunate today to be joined by some of our councillors and candidates from all over Ireland, from the south to the east, from our regional cities to Dublin City as well. I'm going to introduce our panel for our discussion today. We are joined by Jennifer Cummins, who is a local area rep in Dublin Southwest Inner City. We have Deirdre McCormack, who is a candidate in Baltinglass in West Wicklow. We are joined by Peter Melrose, who is a candidate for the Social Democrats in Maynooth, which is in Kildare North. And we have two of our elected councillors. We are joined by Councillor Liam Quaide, who is a Social Democrat representative for East Cork on Cork County Council. And we have Councillor Mary Roche, who is representative for Waterford City on Waterford Council. So can you all give them a big round of applause and then open them. Mary, I think we're going to start with you because I think out of everyone on this panel today, you probably have the most experience out of all of us because you have been a councillor for many years in Waterford. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think that local government has changed since when you were first elected and now in Waterford Council?
Yes, well, I was elected in 1999, which is not today or yesterday. I know. And the reason I ran for election at that time, actually, because I had no background in politics, was because that council in Waterford had no women on it at all in Waterford City. And I was always giving out about it, essentially. So somebody said to me, well, why don't you run? And frankly, it was like somebody slapped me with a wet dishcloth, and I thought, well, why don't I run? So I opted to run, and when I was elected, I was the only woman on the council at that time. So it was a big step, but really you need more than 1 or 2 or 3 women on a council. You need to get up to the 40, the 50% for it to start making a meaningful difference. So that was the initial reason I ran, I guess. And then once you have a council seat, there are so many areas that you can get involved in. It's a wonderful platform. You do your council work, obviously, you can help people. The amount of people who think you can get houses for them when you can't is actually scary. But you have a platform then, and I would tend to focus on a lot of national issues, looking at how Ireland is structured badly and how the regions in particular are funded poorly and try to work at that level. But it gives you a platform for so many different areas. I was just saying to Liam before we came on air, you really have to be a jack of all trades because you have to have a little bit of knowledge on planning, roads, land use, transport, housing, every single thing, and then health, education, any single thing that you can think of that has to do with how Ireland runs or how your local area runs, fire, it comes across the councillor's desk. So.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And I'm so glad that you started actually talking about stepping up because there were so few women on your council. I'm the only woman elected in my area. So unfortunately, it is still an issue. And I think it's so heartening to know that we have so many women in the Social Democrats coming forward and putting themselves forward and stepping up, because it is so, so important. But I just want to come back to something that you said there. You were saying that the structure of local government, and you spoke a little bit there about the funding being centralised. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we can change it to make things a little bit more effective, let's say in your own council?
Yep. Well, the Congress for Local and Regional Authorities of Europe issued a report only last October about Ireland, and I think we come ahead of the Russian Federation and Moldova in terms of devolving authority to local government. And I was elected, as I say, in 1999. In 2014, we had a thing called Better Local Government, which didn't make local government any better. In fact, it probably made it worse. Like when I was elected first, you had things like the health boards, which had council representation. You had water, which was under the control of the council. All those now have been centralised. And about 40 to 48% of local councils' funding comes directly from central government, but with a tag on it. So it doesn't come to you and say, these are for the priorities for Waterford or Cork or Dublin. It says this is for roads and this is for housing, and everything is micromanaged to within an inch of its life. So for example, if you take housing, there are about 9 stages that you have to go through. Now, councils have they have architects, they have surveyors, they have experts in all those areas, but every little step goes up to the department, is reworked, it comes back down. So when you decide to put housing on a site, it can be 2-3 years before you'll actually see something beginning. That's in a situation where you have a crisis is absolutely ridiculous. So councils are micromanaged to within an inch of their life. And things like water, if I had a constituent who had an issue with a water problem before, I could actually have that problem solved. Now that everything has been centralised and moved away, you can't solve that anymore. Transportation, something that has never been in control of councils. Like we had our WMATS, it's called Waterford Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy, which was devised by TFI, Transport for Ireland, last year. They came up with a strategy. Now they're down to the level of trying to implement bus connects and put in new buses, but it's being done in Dublin, where quite frankly, they don't know Waterford. They don't know where the people of Waterford need to get to. It's a complete desk exercise. Something may well be issued which causes us a lot of problems because we know it doesn't tick the boxes that need to be ticked in our local areas, but that is something that is done at a central level. I'm not going to monopolise the entire conversation, but there's so many things that I could drone on probably for 4 hours and send all your RTE news now to sleep on.
No, but I think it is so important because as a sitting councillor as well, it is so frustrating, and I don't think people realise, and particularly when it comes to the National Transport Authority and other sort of state agencies like that, everything has to be signed off, and they do not have the local knowledge.
No.
And it's incredibly frustrating as councillors, and I think we're going to come back to that a little bit more later in the discussion. But I want to move on to you, Peter, because I think it is, you've heard that there's a lot of frustrations with us sitting councillors. So it is so important that we see new candidates put themselves forward, because we desperately need change in our local authorities and on our local councils. And I'd be very interested to hear about why you have decided to put your name forward, why you decided to get involved in the Social Democrats and run as a candidate in Maynooth.
Yeah, so my wife and I were looking for a place in North Kildare to settle down to buy. And I guess the catalyst for all of this was we were on the waiting list for the now infamous Mullen Park estate in Maynooth, which, for those of you who don't recognise the name, was, well, there was an attempt to bulk buy certain phases. So we were on the waiting list, and I remember distinctly getting the email at, whatever, 8:30 in the morning saying, oh, thank you for being on the waiting list. That waiting list is now done. It's been, all those phases are now secured by X, Y, and Z. And then by, I think, about 10 to 9, I had furiously typed an email to the local TDs, and it was Catherine Murphy that got back to me and was equally outraged. Which led to me going on to Primetime and talking about the trials and tribulations of trying to navigate the housing market in the current climate as someone who wanted to settle down and start a family. And it was incredibly difficult and incredibly frustrating at the time. But then we saw that the amount of attention that was brought to the scheme, and then eventually ended up with the stamp duty tax being raised. I know that it didn't stop the so-called cuckoo funds coming in and purchasing other estates, but it gave me my first, I guess, taste of, wow, change is possible. Things can get done if it's done in the right way. And Catherine has and continues to be a great mentor to me in the party. So from that then I went to some branch meetings, and then I realized in my local area, because we were eventually lucky enough to purchase a home in Maynooth, that there were things at a local level that I wanted to see changed. Those things that I could see with my eyes, and then things that you get from talking to people around the place. So for example, straight away transport became an issue. My wife and I, the day we went to see the house we eventually purchased, we went for lunch at a restaurant, and we overlooked the town square in Maynooth, and we were like, wow, this is lovely. Imagine just going up there with a buggy on whatever Saturday, Sunday morning, getting coffee or something from the market. And we realized that the transport strategy advocated the abolition of that square, which was very frustrating to hear, that there was a great community space there that was, I believe very firmly in public transport, but not at the expense of our community spaces. And that's led me into areas such as I'm now starting a community market in Maynooth on the square, because there are casual trading laws that allow it. So it's great to I dipped my toe in with housing, and then I began to see all the possibilities that were available to me. And Catherine and the North Kildare team have just been so good. The councillors there as well have been so helpful to me and provided me with so many different areas of knowledge and skills. So I've just been really thankful for that. And I have to say, in terms of being in such a positive culture in the party, and I think we can all agree on that, so positive and encouraging, and want people to be the best and empowering other people. And it's really refreshing to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And I just think your story of how you came into politics, is something that would resonate particularly with so many young people and young families. And I believe you now have a young family yourself, because I see your little boy, I think, on TikTok helping you out canvassing. He's very cute. And I think it is so important that we have people speaking about issues that are impacting young families, because that is something that I hear so often in Limerick City. In your experience, what would you say are the main issues impacting young families currently?
I mean, you start with the cost of living, and it all kind of spirals from there, Childcare is a huge issue for us. We secured a place in a creche by absolute chance. It was, my wife was attending a mother and baby meeting in the local area. Someone happened to say to her, there's a place just opening, ring now, ring now. And just by sheer chance, we got a place. There are so many families not getting those places though. There are so many creches not taking children until they're the age of 1, which means that we're going to struggle financially this year. It's not going to be a good year for us. We are really budgeting to try and make it until Conan turns 1, we can get into childcare, and my wife can go back to work. But it's very frustrating. I think we need to move towards a national public childcare system. That's, for me, that's the only way.
Absolutely, and I think that is a really important point and extremely well made. And Councillor Liam Quaide, I'm going to come to you next, because I think, talking about childcare and, perhaps issues that fall directly outside of the remit of what local councils do or what local councillors do. I know, similar to myself, you are a frontline healthcare worker, and you know, I am someone who was very motivated getting into politics to work and advocate on behalf of mental health in my community, and it is wonderful to see mental health reform here at our conference here today. And as well as that, one of the reasons that I joined the party is that disability and accessibility is extremely important to me. And in Limerick, one of the things that we have done, and I'm very proud to have achieved over my term, is making Limerick the first autism-friendly local authority in the country. And I know that this is something that you are very passionate about as well. You have been a very, very strong advocate in your local community and reached what I would say national prominence in relation to your work, in relation to retaining a residential mental health service in your community. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the importance of local councillors taking leadership on these issues?
Yeah, so the campaign to resist the closure of that community, it was the only community residential mental health service in East Cork, and it was serving a population of 100,000 people, an absolutely vital service for people with the highest level of need. And the strange thing about that campaign was that it had nothing to do with the council. It fell completely outside what the council could do directly. But I think it really highlighted to me that our greatest power as councillors is the public voice that we have. So it was basically, the battleground for that was mainly in Oireachtas committee hearings, and I was in conjunction with families who were affected by this closure. I pursued 7 Oireachtas committee hearings, and we also got a huge amount of media coverage, which was absolutely vital for this campaign. I was given advice very early on that the likelihood would be that we'd have quite an upsurge of, you know, support and media attention that would kind of wane over time, and that the HSE would basically kind of wait it out. And I think the main achievement that we had was that we kept the stories of those people that were affected alive in the public domain, and we did that, you know, by relentlessly pursuing it through the committees, escalating it to the HSE board, to the minister, and eventually managed to get a meeting with Bernard Gloucester. So we went from a very desolate position in late 2021 to having all of those 24-hour staffed placements removed from East Cork, you know, at the stroke of a pen, to 2 years later, after an epic struggle, there was a commitment to building a new service on that site, and also the HSE had acquired 2 new properties. So that amounted to, you know, multi-million euro capital investment and a multi-million euro yearly staffing investment as well. So I think, you know, the kind of, I think what it really highlights to me is we should never underestimate our power, even as councillors.
Absolutely, and I think that deserves a round of applause, because I think that's a wonderful outcome.
Can I just make one point, Elisa, about that? Because I think what it also really highlighted to me was the importance of collegiality and working with politicians across the spectrum. And it was actually through my interactions with the Health Committee that I first made contact with Roche in Shortall, who was an invaluable background support through all of this, very understated, but really vital support through all of this in pursuing this, in keeping it on the Health Committee's agenda.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that all of us in our local councils, and I know Mary yourself, that's probably what brought you first into politics as well, was in relation to health services in your own community.
Yeah, there had been a massive campaign for public radiotherapy in my first term, and Fianna Fáil had more or less promised that they would deliver it, and well, suffice to say, a long story short, they didn't. And it eventually came through the private sector. But there are campaigns, people will know them in their own areas. We have one in Waterford currently for 24/7 cardiac care. So if you're going to get a heart attack in Waterford, you may get it between 8 and 8 on Monday to Friday, but please don't get it overnight or at the weekend because you'll be carted to Cork. And you know there's a golden hour, a 90-minute window from the time you get your heart attack to the time you get your stents, and that is very, very difficult. Anybody who has driven the N25 will tell you that would be impossible to do, even in the back of an ambulance, because you've got to go to UHW first, then you get transferred to Cork. And these are literally life and death issues that councillors deal with all the time. And you know, the things that are coming across all of our desks, I'm quite sure at the moment, I find extremely frustrating, particularly in the area of housing, because to me, there is no sense of urgency with such, and whatever else the services are, if you don't have a house, you know, that has to be the very, very first thing that you give people, is a secure place to live. So if you don't have that, and I just don't get any sense of urgency, and that's one of the things that attracted me to the Social Democrats, is that they say what they mean and they mean what they say. So they're not trying to, you know, sit on both sides of the fence or even on top of the fence. They come down very firmly on the side of social justice and helping people, and ethically very correct as far as I can see it. And regardless of if that's not the populist line, because it is the right thing to do. And people say that they want leaders who will do the right thing, but they don't often actually follow that through in the ballot box. So people need to consider very carefully what they're doing with their vote, particularly in local elections, because I know I'm biased, but I would always say, give me a good councillor any day over a TD.
I fully agree with that. And I think that we can't overestimate the importance of having good councillors for our areas, because the area in which we live and our communities impacts everything about our lives. It impacts how we get to work, where we live, how healthy we are. Can we live happy, fulfilled, productive lives? Do we have community facilities, amenities? So everything and how we live our lives comes back to what we can access and how productive and positive and happy we are in our local communities. So Liam, I'm going to come back to you, because I want to ask you how we can make local government really work for our local communities. Is it working for our local communities, and how can we make it work better for the communities that we serve?
I think there are reforms of local government that need to happen, like directly elected mayors, devolution of some powers, and I think we'll probably talk about those in the course of our dialogue. But I think there's one kind of simple truth that is quite kind of liberating when you think about it, and that is, I think the more engaged that we are with our communities and the more engaged we are with the council, the more we make local government work for our constituents and our communities. I think any person that comes into contact with the council for the first time is often struck by this very kind of vast, quite impersonal bureaucracy. You know, it feels very corporate. It can feel very alienating to interact with it. You know, you might put in a housing representation and get a response that isn't signed by anybody, or the same might happen. You might make a complaint about illegal dumping, and there's a kind of a lack of a human element sometimes. And I think that's where we come in, almost to have a kind of a humanizing effect, and to push people into contact with that bureaucracy in a very meaningful way. And I think we all learn most effectively through doing. So it's in the doing of, you know, working with a community group on like a grant application or on a collective planning submission, that they're learning how to get to grips with this really vast organisation and how to make it work for them, how to maybe obtain financial support or have issues addressed. And I think also the point about collegiality is important, because you very rarely get something achieved materially in the council without some collaboration with your colleagues. And if a community group comes to me and they want to install a footpath or they want a seawall repaired, I encourage them to also lobby other councillors from other parties and independents, because if there's a collective push behind something, it's more likely to materialise. And that risks, you know, spreading the glory a bit, and you may kind of feel that, you know, you don't get full credit. But I think ultimately, that would be more productive for the community, and also I think constituents will actually respect that and vote accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are very good points, and definitely I think that's something we're going to discuss a little bit more kind of later in the discussion, particularly around the directly elected mayors and humanising politics and local politics a little bit more, which definitely needs to happen. Just going back to like community facilities within our areas and local governments providing these. Deirdre McCormack, you are a candidate for Baltinglass in West Wicklow. I think I first heard of you because you had been very involved in a campaign in your area in relation to swimming pools. And I am a huge advocate for swimming and swimming pools. The first time I actually met Catherine Murphy and Roche Shortall was about a month before the local elections in 2019, where I brought them down to the River Shannon in Limerick, where I was running my Swimmable Limerick Swims, which is open water swimming in the River Shannon. I didn't get them in for a swim that day. But Holly, when you're coming down next, we'll get you in for a swim in the Shannon. I just think it is something that is so important, and it comes back to healthy communities for me. I think it's amazing that someone who is unelected can run a campaign to bring these community facilities into our community. I would love to know how you did it. Can you tell us a little bit about it and perhaps your passion for running and having community facilities within your area?
Thank you. Well, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's so important. I think to some people, a swimming pool is a leisure item, but actually it's so much more, because swimming is an actual life skill. It's like reading. I was in a meeting with Mary McMorrow, who's the operations manager for Swim Ireland, who are the national governing body for swimming, and she said you wouldn't hesitate to finance a library, but people hesitate when we ask them to finance a swimming pool. And it is a life skill. It's accessible for everyone. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to have a certain physical ability or mental ability. Everyone can get in the water. And where our campaign started was back in that really hot summer, July 2018. I was about 5 months pregnant with my son Malachy, and it was really warm and I was melting and I just wanted to sit in some water. And I went looking, where was my nearest swimming pool, and I discovered there wasn't one in the Baltinglass Municipal District. So I live in Blessington, which is part of the district. It's 72 kilometres. Very big. We've no swimming pool. We're the only municipal district in Wicklow without a swimming pool, and we've got a pretty much big population compared to the other municipal districts. So I put on Facebook, we have a Blessington Mums page, and I said, hey, does anyone think we should have a swimming pool? And they were like, yes, we really need a swimming pool in West Wicklow. We started a petition. We had 1,000 people sign it overnight. Local radio stations got interested. We got into contact with the council. We talked to councillors. It grew legs. We started a committee. It was real community power. We engaged with the council, and they were very good. We all worked together. They put in a funding application for the large-scale sports and infrastructure fund, and it was unsuccessful, unfortunately. So then we met with the Department of Sport, and we said, well, how can we get a better application in? What can we do? What do we need to improve on? And they said, well, you need to prove that if we build a swimming pool in West Wicklow, there'll be an increase in participation in sport. And I was like, how do I do that? That's a chicken and egg. How do I prove that people will go swimming if I don't have a swimming pool? And that was around, about the time that we were coming out of the pandemic. And Swim Ireland had this programme on saying that, a generation of children have missed out the opportunity to learn how to swim. So we got in touch with them and we said, we fully support your campaign, but we have generations of people in West Wicklow who have never had the opportunity to learn how to swim. And we have older members of our population of our community who they're afraid of water. They've just never had that chance. And that's shocking. It is shocking. So they came on board and they said, hey, we're doing this new project called the Pop-Up Pool Project. We think it would be a great idea for West Wicklow. So we worked with Swim Ireland, the national governing body. We worked with our community, our schools, our businesses, everyone. And we worked with the council, and we brought a pop-up pool to West Wicklow for 3 months, and we had 600 children a week learning how to swim who had never had that opportunity before. And it just goes to swimming is part of the school curriculum now, and we had schools telling us that they couldn't bring the children swimming. One principal said, we're failing our children because we don't have this facility in our community. So the pop-up pool was a real demonstration of how a council and a community can work together with a national governing body. So we shouldn't limit ourselves. We should, aim high, and that's the collaboration, working together. That's how we're going to achieve stuff.
That's actually so inspirational to listen to. I mean, to get 600 children, young people to learn to swim, and it's, as you said, it's collaboration and aim high, and you can achieve it, And
we had aquafit classes. We had one woman who just had a hip replacement. We had a mermaid class. They came and did water polo. We had birthday parties. There was loads of stuff. It was brilliant.
Oh, I so want to go to the mermaid class. That sounds amazing.
Clean had the pop-up pool in Leixlip as well, and huge success.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Like Nuala and I were able to talk about our experiences because Leixlip had it after we had it, so we were able to talk about what worked, what didn't work, and I think that's really something that works well in the Social Democrats. We all actually talk to each other and work together.
Yeah, it is.
Shocker.
Yes, we were all very jealous of Councillor Colleen's pop-up pool. That was based in...
It was in Leixlip.
In Leixlip, yeah, which was just fantastic to see, because once again, Kildare, I presume, doesn't have a huge amount of public swimming pools.
No, and it was a similar story. Once the pop-up pool was there, it was used very frequently and by lots. So.
And it's wonderful to see that. And I was actually chatting to Deirdre recently about this because I grew up in London City, and there was a policy when I was growing up in London City that you had to be, every home had to be within half an hour's walking distance of a public leisure centre.
That's amazing.
I mean, that is what we should be striving for. There's no reason why we shouldn't. Deirdre, as well, I've been following you on social media, and you are out and about in your local community a lot. You are meeting a lot of people. I would love to know, what are the issues coming up in West Wicklow at the moment? You obviously have a fantastic national representation in Jennifer Whitmore. What are the issues coming up to you, and are they being communicated back to Wicklow Council and being acted on?
So there's a lot of similar issues like transport. Jennifer and I have just been working on an issue with an 885 bus that it was extended and it's taking in lots of extra towns, but they cancelled the 4 p.m. service, so all the kids that were using it to get home from school had no way to get home from school. So Jennifer and I worked together on that, and we were able to get that sorted, which was brilliant. But issues that are coming up, there's the transport, there's a lack of amenities, lack of growing spaces. Baltinglass needs a pedestrian bridge really badly. We need a swimming pool, we need football pitches, there's problems with our footpaths, things like that. We've had a lot of houses built now, and our amenities in our schools haven't caught up with them. And now we have a really good opportunity. The Blessington local area plan is actually opening for public consultation on Wednesday, which is really good timing. And in previous times, for previous public consultation periods, we've been really successful with the pool campaign. So we had the county development plan for Wicklow was opened a few years ago. There were 2 public consultation periods. We saw this as an opportunity to make sure that they knew that West Wicklow wanted a swimming pool. So I did online workshops encouraging my community to make submissions. I did a video showing them, this is how you make your submission. This is how you engage with your council. And Wicklow County Council said there was an increase in people making submissions and an overwhelming call for a swimming pool. We got the swimming pool into the county development plan for the first time in 50 years. And then we worked with Swim Ireland and Water Safety Ireland, and we got it made as a priority in the county development plan. So we'll be doing that again with the local area plan. But your local area plans are going to be coming up for review. Go and look at your public consultation periods. Ask your councillors, when's that open? How do I do this? Engage with the council, and that's how we're really going to make a difference, because we did it in West Wicklow. You can do it in your own constituency. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jennifer Cummins, we're going to come to you next. You are a candidate in Dublin Southwest Inner City, and I was very excited when I saw your name being put forward as a candidate because you have just done an enormous amount of work. You were chair of Educate Together, of which we are very thankful in Limerick, and I think all over Ireland.
Yeah.
for the work that Educate Together has done in providing education to young people all over Ireland. So I was delighted to see you put your name forward as a Social Democrat councillor. And I think that you have just a huge amount of experience when it comes to young people and representing the voice of young people. Similar to Peter, you have a young family. What do you think are the issues for young people in Dublin City at the moment? And do you think that they are adequately being addressed by Dublin Council?
Like, I've worked for all of my adult working life with children and young people in Roche and Shortall's constituency, and she's always an inspiration. So when somebody asked me would I run for the Social Democrats, I was like, yeah. I was like, yes, I will, thank you. And the person who asked me is here, so thank you very much, Lorraine. But I think for young people and children, like what Mary said, if you don't have a secure base, if you don't have a home, you are at a disadvantage from day one. And the young people that I work with in the school completion programme, there are many of them who do not have a home to go to that's there all the time. They're moving, they're staying in their grannies, they're staying in their aunties, they're moving. How will they engage in society if they are not able to find a secure home? They can't have parties. What about the young people in direct provision? It's the same thing. There's also the issue for young people in the neighbourhood that I'm hoping to represent on Dublin City Council, is that we do not have enough green space in southwest inner city. We have the least amount of green space in the entire country in that area. And the community has been fighting for playing pitches, for sports fields, for a pool. I mean, there's a theme going through here. There's a lack of facilities for people in society. And I suppose that when young people are not engaged in things, if they're sitting in their room, if they're on social media, those stereotypes, if they're the ones who are going to riots, is this because they're not engaged? Yes, because there's nothing to engage in. And so as a youth worker, we provided services for young people to engage. I was on the board of the National Youth Council for a very long time when we were advocating for young people to become involved in politics, to become involved in their society. And as long as we're engaging young people, we will learn more, because the most inspiring things that I've heard of is from children and young people, because they say it as it is. There's no rebosh. They're just saying it as it is. And they're saying it clearly. They're saying what they want, and there's no ulterior motive. They're just saying, give me, I want. So if you ask a young person, what would you like in your community? I would like a GAA pitch. I would like a pool. I would like a cinema. I would like an ice rink. Like in Dolphin's Barn, where my family grew up, my dad's family grew up, there was an ice rink, there was a cinema. They're not there anymore. Why are we going backwards? Like, why are we taking away these services and these things that make our life really, that's what we're alive for. We're not alive for the really fun times. We're not alive just to do boring stuff. We're alive to like really engage and have a really good time. So if we have an ice rink, if we have a pool, if we have playing pitches, if we have other things that are not just the pub, and I have nothing against the pub, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is that, we have to have places that we can hang out with our neighbours. And in my community, thank you. In my community recently, 2 years ago, it's not recently, 2 years ago, the community centre burned down, and it's still burned down. And so we meet on the road, it's really hard to meet somewhere. But every community should have a community centre. So you should have these are basic things that I feel that we need to go back to the basics so that we can build our society, because that's what it's about. Certainly for me and the people in South West Inner City that I'm knocking on the doors to speak with.
Absolutely. And I think that what you were saying in relation to young people and the lack of services, the lack of spaces, community facilities, outlets, that is something that I know the councillors and the candidates that we have, the TDs that we have just been hearing non-stop. Yeah. And it comes back to fundamentally extremely poor planning over decades. Yeah. And now that this is what our young people are left with, absolutely nothing in their communities. And even when you're on a council and you're really trying to advocate, it can be very difficult because a lot of young people just aren't represented on our communities and on our councils in any shape or form. And so it is actually so heartening to look out at the crowd here today and see so many young people, because sometimes it's very difficult to sell local government and discussions about local government. So actually, it just heartens me so much to see a room full of young people, but also of all generations, involved in this discussion. It's fantastic. And Jennifer, once again, I have seen you very active on social media, out and about in Dublin City. And I think that, particularly in the national media, we are hearing a lot about Dublin City at the moment and the issues in Dublin City. I would be very interested to hear what are the issues coming up in Dublin City at the moment. And when you are elected to council, what are you going to do in relation to these issues?
Well, I think for a city centre, right? So there's this pressure that because we're a city, we should be an economy. So we're the centre of the economy. It's all about making money and business and shopping and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But actually, in the southwest in our city, we're a community. We are there for years. Last year we had our centenary, so the housing estate that I live in was 100 years old. So we had a centenary celebration to celebrate our neighbourhood, and it was the first housing, I won't bore you with the details, but it was the first housing built after, in kind of around 1922, so it was state funded. It's very inspirational to live in one of those houses. It does have cracks and all the rest, but it's, But from that centenary, celebrating our houses in this neighbourhood, we thought about what a fun place we live in, what a wonderful community we have. And when I knock on the doors, people are saying, oh, housing, there's no housing. The housing around here, first of all, it's very expensive to live there. Second of all, there's transient accommodation, student accommodation. My daughter who's here is in college. She won't be staying in that student accommodation because we can't afford that, because it's more than our mortgage. It's like, it's not, we can't sustain that. Student accommodation should be price friendly for students, like when I went to college 100 years ago. So, but there's also, that kind of making society and community, that focus is so important. So for the housing, you're building housing that people can afford to live in that community, services in that community so that we can create that sense of fun. You see your neighbours, you have somewhere to participate in your community. So that's the thing, that's that push against, yes, we're an economy, but yeah, we're a community. So where do you stop? Our community feels like we're fighting that all the time, that we're not just a city centre location for tourists. We're actually a community, we live there, and we are, we're neighbours, we want to have a nice place to hang out, and yeah, that's the. And there's other kind of issues that come into what everybody has said here, the transport. Like I know, Mary, you were saying that down in Waterford, you feel like somebody from ages away came down and doesn't know what's happening. We're in the city centre and people are saying to me all the time, bus connects, that makes no sense. Or, why are we doing it this way? Or there's a disconnect between what is happening in reality. Or I know there is consultations, but it sometimes feels that people are not being consulted or don't feel like they're being consulted, or that we have to be gatekeepers. The amount of times people ask me to do stuff because they think I can, get them information. And I'm only like one step ahead, but there shouldn't be gatekeepers. If people are entitled to information, they should get that information. And that comes up a lot on the doors.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think it comes back to sometimes these consultations, be it Bus Connects or be whatever, I think they are done as a tick box. I think people feel it's a tick box exercise that has to be done. It's not being done in an actual, meaningful way.
They need to work in two ways. You have to make enough noise, and the councils and the people carrying out these consultations need to listen, and they need to take it on board. It can't just be a box-ticking exercise.
Just even one step further than that, there's like I've seen too much frustration, beautiful plans and things laid out. And where are they? Yeah. Like the thing I was saying about the square, the local area plan had these amazing plans for Maynooth Square. And it looks like it's derelict because
we were promised with Bus Connects, we were promised our 65 bus would be every hour to Tala. We're still on a 2-hour, we have a bus every 2 hours. That's 7 days a week. We have 16 buses a day. Our population has now tripled in the last 20 years. We still have the service that we had 20 years ago. It's ridiculous. If they make plans, they need to follow through on them.
Yeah. But the point you made, Elisa, about consultation is it's almost done backwards. So, like, I'm around a long time now, so the the initial draft document, if you like, is done up. Now that's within a hair's breadth of the final document. You can be absolutely sure of it. Consultation actually needs to take place before any draft document, particularly with something as iterative as transport that has changed so much over the years. But once something is on paper, that's almost, you know, the final document. They may listen to a submission from the Department of Transport or the Department of Environment. They're not really listening to Joe and Josephine's soap on the road. But we live in a country where we've got Google, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, all the headquarters. We should be miles ahead in terms of participative democracy and involving people in meaningful consultations. I mean, I had a row with somebody at a transportation infrastructure committee because of this only yesterday, because, you know, they will come to us with a proposal that is 90% what they are going to do and probably nothing like what we need. Then as the public face of a council, people start, you know, slating you and knocking on your door and saying, how did you allow this? And you're going like, well, actually, we can only operate within. And it feels to me like the balance of power, and this is one of the things that the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities said, like Ireland scores really poorly. The principle of subsidiarity says that you're supposed to make decisions as close as possible to people. And in Austria, for example, councillors represent 150 people. Now, that's probably slightly too small, but Ireland is by far the largest. Every councillor in Ireland, on average, represents about 5,500 people, which is the biggest in Europe. I think Portugal is probably next, and they're about 600 or 700, and then it goes way down, you know. So, but I also think it comes to valuing democracy, and I think particularly in the last couple of years, you know, we always prided ourselves in Ireland that we didn't have a huge far-right voice. Now that voice is finding itself and organising, and, you know, we need to actually value what we have in democracy, because it can be gone in a heartbeat, and then we'll be crying over what we had, but we need to protect it now, you know. And just to go back to what you were saying, Deirdre, in terms of councillors actually delivering, you know, one of the things that we did was in the development plan, there was a plot of land in an extremely developed area of the Williamstown Road that the planners wanted to put housing on out at Kilcara. But the councillors literally, what you were saying, Liam, banded together and said, under no circumstances we are reserving this for a park. Now, it's taken a long time, and sometimes the pace of council work can be glacial. And, you know, I came from the private sector where if you see a problem, you solve it. It doesn't work like that in councils. And people, in general, don't like change, even if it's a change in the right direction. It nearly has to be implemented and in place, and then people go, oh yeah, that was actually a good idea. Whereas when you're implementing it, the world and its mother is against it, because it is, like, we have focused very much on pedestrianisation and widening our streets and trying to limit traffic through the city. We have a ring road to try and take through traffic out now. It's tolled, which is totally counterintuitive, but that's not within our bailiwick. Doesn't mean we can't shout and stomp about it with our platform. But there are things, like Waterford is 1,100 years old. I have to say, it's the oldest city in Ireland. But we are trying to pivot from a very industrial city to a tourism city. So we won the best place in Ireland to live from the Irish Times. The New York Times said it was one of the 52 places to visit in the world in 2024. So we're getting there, but we're way behind the big beasts, if you like, of Dublin in terms of tourism and Kerry and that kind of thing. So we have the Greenway, we have the coastline. If you want to swim, come to Waterford, loads of absolutely hundreds of beaches that you can swim, and pools as it happens. But there's a huge amount that councillors can achieve, and people always say to me, oh, you know, what good is local government, until they need a councillor, until they come up against that, as you're saying, Liam, that big monolithic local government that they can't access. And that's where councillors come in as the human face, because we aren't politicians as such. We are people in your community who just got frustrated at the way things were and said, well, actually, I'm bloody well going to get involved in there, and rolled up our sleeves. So I would say to everybody, it's literally, all it is getting involved in your community. That's all being a councillor is. We are not a they, we are a you. Absolutely.
I think what I am hearing from all of the panellists here today is that there is disconnect between council executives and perhaps state agencies who implement or design a lot of local policy, and residents and people who actually live in the local areas. I mentioned at the start that Limerick is going to be the first county in Ireland to have a directly elected mayor. This is absolutely extremely exciting for Limerick, I think. And this is actually something that the Social Democrats have advocated for many years now. I remember reading an excellent document that was written by then councillors Gary Gannon and Cian O'Callaghan in 2017 called Democratising Dublin, which was really laying out best practice when it comes to directly elected mayors for Dublin, which obviously Limerick has got it now, but you know, it's something that certainly our Dublin TDs have really been advocating for many years. And within that document, it was really advocating that any implementation of a directly elected mayor in Ireland should be in line with successful models in international communities. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to really be happening with Limerick. You know, the legislation is currently going through the Dáil. When we look at international communities and international models where it has been successfully implemented, the directly elected mayor would have a lot of say over planning, over climate adaptation and mitigation, which is something that is really extremely important in our local communities at the moment. Transport, which is something that I think any of us serving on local authorities would agree needs to be implemented at a local level. But also things like health and housing policy and regeneration policies as well. So while I think it is extremely welcome for Limerick that we are going to have much more accountability, it does fall a little bit short, but I think on the whole, it is going to be an extremely exciting time for local government. We will finally have someone showing leadership within our communities and within our county. There'll be, whoever the directly elected mayor is in Limerick will be able to set out a very, very clear vision. But I think more importantly, finally, we will have someone that is accountable for decisions that are made. Because I think one of the things that I was quite surprised by when I was elected in 2019 in Limerick was how many executive powers that there are. So how many decisions in our local communities are actually decisions for the council executive. And your local councillors, as Mary said rightly, we are the ones that are stopped on the street. I get stopped 5 times a day if I'm walking down the street in Limerick. We are the ones that are accountable for every decision that are made in our local communities, but often we actually don't even have a say in it. So I think a directly elected mayor is such a progressive, it's such a positive thing for Limerick, and I'm very, very excited about it. I would love to know what, Jen, I know you're Dublin City, I think there might be a plebiscite that is going to be happening in Dublin in relation to directly elected mayors. You know, what are all your thoughts on directly elected mayors? Is it a positive thing? Is it a negative thing? And would you like to see it in Dublin?
Yeah, I'd love to see it in Dublin. I think, again, going back to representation, when people feel like the word representation is so important, because that's what we're doing, we're representing our communities. So if there's a frustration, certainly in my neighbourhood, that they don't feel they're represented, they don't feel listened to, they feel that there's the powers of the councillors they're very disenfranchised. So if there's somebody there who can change that and challenge that, that's always a good thing. It's always good to have someone who's accountable, that system is accountable. I think that's why people maybe don't vote, because they feel that there's no point. What's the point? I'm not going to make any difference. They can't change anything. And I think that's really, really I think that's dangerous for democracy when people don't vote, actually. I think, you know, there used to be ads on the TV when I was a child about everything, you know, don't climb the electricity pole, don't do this, don't do that. You know, like, you know, don't swallow this bottle of poison and whatever. But like, I really feel we have to have things about, this is how you register to vote. Yes. This is what it is to vote. This is how you fill in the form. This is not how, we're not telling you what to do. We're saying this is how the form should be filled out. And if you choose to vote for this person, then it's this way. Because I think so many people whose doors, and I've spoken to so many candidates this week since last night, since we've been here at the conference, that there is people who've moved into neighbourhoods who are not registered to vote. People registered to vote, please check the register.ie, check that you're registered to vote. Anyone living in Ireland can vote in the locals. It's so important. Democracy is you know, it's fragile. It's fragile right now. Dialogue is so important, just going back to what you were saying, Mary, earlier about that. We need to engage in conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. But a directly elected mayor makes things that there is accountability, which will engage more people in voting and participation, hopefully.
Peter, you might just come in there. Yeah. And then we might have to wrap it up.
Yeah, just a couple of points there. I think over the last 10 years, our local government has been hollowed out. You know, I think it was 950 councillors lost in the Local Government Reform Act in 2014. That wasn't a progressive decision, that was an economic decision. And I think it's to the detriment of all of the county councils in the country. I think a directly elected mayor would be a fantastic opportunity, like Liam was saying, to humanise the council and have a public-facing leadership that's elected by the public. I see Councillor Bill Clear down the front row there is Mayor Nace and Social Democrats. I think he'd be a fantastic directly elected mayor in Kildare County Council. He's giving me the death stare right now. But you know, it would be great for people to have that opportunity and for someone to have that kind of agency who's, like I said, front-facing and able to make those decisions for the benefit of the local area and the local community.
Excellent, great, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Does anyone else want to come into that? Liam? Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking earlier about the power that we sometimes have that we don't realise we have as councillors, but I think we all have the that kind of recurring feeling of frustration as well when we come up against executive decisions and resistances. And one simple example in Cork is there's a real paucity of public bins pretty much everywhere, and I would say there's almost unanimity among councillors across party divides that we need more public bins, we need to recruit more outdoor staff, and we keep coming up against this resistance. And as you said, Elisa, we tend to kind of get the flak for that, and you know, people kind of remonstrate with us online and say, why aren't you providing this, and who are we electing? But I think that's one modest example of where a directly elected mayor could have a real impact, and you know, there's so many others.
Provided that they give the directly elected mayor the authority to make, I mean, we're great in Ireland at making laws that are unenforceable or bringing in directly elected mayors and telling people what they're going to do and then not giving them the tools to actually do it. So as the old song says, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. So, you know, they can either do this properly or they can make a mess of it. I would have my suspicions.
I know.
Well, if the Social Democrats were in those positions.
Unfortunately, we could talk here for hours, I think, on this. And Liam, you mentioned bins. I could talk for hours on that in Limerick. But look, I just want to say thank you all so much for your contributions today. I just think is so exciting that we have Social Democrat councillors and candidates, many of which I see here, bring so much enthusiasm, so many new ideas, fresh energy. I think that is what all our local authorities need all over Ireland, and I hope to see our local authorities filled with Social Democrats come June 2024. I think so many of us were inspired by Holly's win by one vote to Cork County Council in 2019, and I think that just shows the importance of everyone's vote and everyone's voice. So I will say to the people who are joining us on RTE News, please get out and vote. Your voice is so important and it impacts your everyday life and how everything is planned in your community. So thank you all so much for joining us, and I'd like you to give our panellists a big round of applause. Thank you.